Chairman, I think that, it is in our borough plan as a development for housing, and as far as I'm concerned, is at the moment it is a complete and utter mess, and I fully support the housing going on the land. I think it's a pity that we have the garages to the one side of it, and we have Porchester Engineering to the other side of it, so it's going to be sandwiched in the middle there. But that's as it is, and there's nothing that we can do about it. My concern is, as is basically raised by the deputy, is about coastal erosion. Now, I believe that the developer is getting off on the cheap in this particular site. He chose to land raise rather than to actually help us to put in proper sea defences. He is only paying for a 106 agreement for small amount of mitigation for wildlife. Now, that I suspect is not going to be a considerable amount of money. He is saving, as has been said, on social housing because of the way that the law has been written. We cannot force him to pay for social housing because of the warehousing that's brownfield and it counts against it. Unfortunately, because there was a case in the courts and we can't do that. So he gets off with that, away from that one. He appears to be wanting to walk away from giving us some financial support to actually provide the sea defences, which are much needed in that area. As has been mentioned, Cador Avenue and through that area there, the sea defences need to be done. The partnership, I think, have written a very good response within our report of what actually is needed. Now, to me, is that we should be trying to get some money out of him, to the developer, to actually go towards those costs of the sea defences. Now, if we don't, I suggest those sea defences will gradually get worse. They will erode further into that site. I personally question the red line of where the developer has actually said his property ends. I think it ends beyond that fence. I think that fence has been put further back into the site over a period of years. So I think that he is chosen just to put it inside, so he isn't therefore responsible for the sea defences. How one proves that, I don't honestly know, but I believe that is the case. I would see the situation, as has been said, that the footpath across there has eroded quite considerable since that photograph was taken. It's a pity that we don't have an up-to-date photograph of what it's like today. So, on that basis, in the 2-year period since the photograph was taken, if you go 2 years forward, that erosion is going to be into where the red line is. So therefore, in 2 years' time, if it erodes at the same rate, who is going to be paying for those sea defences? Is the taxpayers of the borough going to have to pick that up for a developer to make profit, which I can't accept and don't agree with. So I believe that we're there. Again, if it goes inside the red line, there's an implication in the report that then the house owners who buy those properties could be liable for those sea defences. So, we get into a whole ramification of issues. Now, as I say, I support the principle of the housing. I am not totally convinced at this moment in time, and I want to listen to the debate, listen to what officers have to say of how we can deal with the sea defences before I make a final decision of which way I'm going to vote. Because I do feel very strongly is that we're being taken for a ride on this one.
This may be for Alex rather than Richard. As you know, I live further on the coast and I own to mean high water. And my understanding is that all the landowners adjoining the sea own to mean high water. Below mean high water belongs to the Queen. So I've raised this question before, but did we ever get a satisfactory answer on the fact that where that fence is immaterial? I have land outside my property, but I own it. Can't do anything with it. But it's always been an issue to me since this application came in its early stages, and that is, like Councillor Price is concerned, this land, they're taking us for a ride, this land belongs to them. I'm talking about the land the other side of the fence down to mean high water, which is now on the beach. Have you got any idea, Richard, what happened about querying that? And Alex, perhaps if you've got any knowledge of where land boundaries are on the sea, on the coast?
Chairman, if it helps to clarify, obviously I'm aware of that concern about, well, that question, shall I put it, as to what does the applicant, what does the landowner own? What's the extent of the ownership? Is the red edges you're looking at on this plan here, is that accurate? And all I can say is that after looking at the land registry details, that red edge there seems to coincide with the title plan that's registered with the land registry.
Is that the last word? Because it's land registry registered, does that define the boundary of the site? Or is there a legal implication that says you might put it down in land registry for your own convenience, but if you own land beyond it, that is yours as well?
Okay, that's where I'm going to hand over to Alex. Sorry.
I mean, Richard was advising in relation to the sort of procedure aspects of this application, and it seems that the applicant has done all that it's necessary to do to certify that he is the owner of the red line boundary. Now, he may or may not own land beyond that, but that's really out with the process of determining this application. I have no idea, I'm afraid, simple planning lawyer in that regard, and so couldn't help but the planning obligation would be able to be put on that land and be capable of enforcement in respect of the maintenance of that part of the open space.
So what you're saying effectively is, by condition, if this land should erode beyond that fence line and into the land, as the current owner is either going to hand it over to a management company or retain the open space, it's not being handed over to this council, does that mean that we can enforce him or the owners of that future open space to repair it at least back to the current red line?
Chairman, you'll see from the report that there is a public open space management plan as part of the Section 106. The Section 106 covers not only the financial contribution towards the solar recreation mitigation project, but also it helps to answer questions about exactly as you've asked there, who will maintain this land in the future? What are the management arrangements for this piece of public open space? And specifically with regards to coastal erosion, because although the site might not be physically eroding at the moment, it soon will be in years to come. If I showed you that photograph of the footpath, it will reach the point where it is actually eroding land that is within the red edge, and by the applicant's own admission they own that piece of land. So the open space management plan looks to address that issue of what happens when that starts to happen. And there's a number of things that are required through that. One is the re-establishment, should I say, of a fence that's moved back in order to delineate where the land is eroding, and a requirement also to reroute that footpath. And that I hope that answers one of the questions that the Deputy Councillor Cunningham raised about the linkage of that footpath. One of the requirements in that public open space management plan would be to have that footpath maintained, but just set further inland, and periodically for that to happen as the coast erodes. The public open space management plan, let me be clear, it wouldn't prevent the erosion of the coast. No. It's not a coastal defence.
Right, so you haven't quite got what I'm asking.
Sorry, Chairman.
Whose responsibility, if that fence collapses into the sea at 2 years' time, 3 years' time, whenever, is it the responsibility of the new management company, whoever they are, to repair it back to the fence line, or are we just settling for it being moved back further and further?
Chairman, I mean, that's tied up through the Public Open Space Management Plan, because the Public Open Space Management Plan through the 106 requires details to be provided about how that will be maintained, how will the fence be maintained, how will the footpath be relocated and maintained periodically. And those details would have to be submitted to the council for us to approve, and then be secured through that legal agreement in perpetuity.
I'd be tempted to like to see those beforehand. Councillor Evans, you're bursting at the seams.
So, I'm perfectly happy with the proposal, save in this one area, and I would be minded to say no, because although we do quote from the planning guidelines in terms of planning obligations should not be sought where there are clearly not necessary to make the development acceptable, I would wish to interpret that a little bit more broadly in favour of future house owners, insofar as we do know as best as we can know that this coastline will erode. Therefore, we do know that these houses, or beyond the red line, will be subject to falling into the water at some stage in the future. All the evidence that I've been made aware of in terms of coastline management and coastline responsibilities say that the responsibility lies with the owner if the owner wishes or can afford to do it. So it would be my interpretation that when this erodes back to the red line, that then becomes responsibility of the owners of the property. And I don't think it matters what sort of parkway maintenance programme you've got agreed, it will matter for nothing at all. So personally, I would want to take some contribution from this developer to go into a pot to be put aside for future coastline protection, which we know is quite expensive, and something for which the Borough Council has absolutely no responsibility at all. And we know in terms of the government guidance of £7 benefit for every £1 of grant, this area would not get any grant, therefore we need to build up pots of money to help do protection in the future. And therefore I would want to see that, notwithstanding our interpretation of the planning practice guidance. I would want to be word creative and try to show how we believe this site is susceptible to future erosion.
I think we're all coming from the same hymn sheet, because I certainly have immediate experience of why haven't we taken this on as open space. That's the first reason. I should think our officers say, oh no, you don't want that, thank you very much. Underneath it's a tip, and on top of it it's a road in a way. The second thing is another one where a company built some houses, they kept the open space, they handed it over to a management company, and they ceased to manage it. And there's nothing we can do because they've almost decided to go out of business as well. So this handed over into a private company to maintain, bearing in mind the front of it's going to disappear bit by bit over a period of time. I want to be a lot more satisfied that we're going to get something out of it, or it's going to fall on our council taxpayers to repair it and keep putting it back together.
Or there will just be enough to fall into, because at 20 million this council taxpayer will not be able to afford to do it.
I fully support the proposal, but that bit just niggles away in the background. Councillor Price?
Chairman, as Richard said, is that this planning application has been on the books for a considerable length of time, and as you know, and both you, myself and ex-councillor Norris had numerous meetings with officers, and at one stage the developer, can't remember whether it was Barrett's now or not, but I think it probably was, wanted to pass the land into the council ownership, and we all said no, we don't want to take the land because of the responsibilities that come with it. So we've always stuck to the point, is that we want a contribution. We don't see why the council taxpayer should have to pick up the bill for this in any stage in the future. And I think, to say the houses, I totally agree with that. I have no problems with the design of the house. I've done a lot of work over the period of a few years of getting the right houses in the right place, because they were totally wrong in the first place. And we've got to where that design is right. But it's just this last little bit. And what I would like to suggest is that the matter is deferred, and that what I would want to see before I could ever sign up to agreeing to this is what are the words and what are the commitments within the 106 agreement. Because if in the update which was put round. It, the third, fifth, sixth line, it talks about the open space, coastal erosion, etc., etc. Therefore, I would want to see what is being agreed between the council and the developer so as that we know what we're actually agreeing to. It may be satisfactory, it may not be satisfactory, but at least we will know exactly what it is, rather than giving a permission, if that was the majority view this afternoon, to do that, and then not being able to get the 106 satisfactory, or the officers might agree to something which we may not agree to, with all respects to our officers. So I would want to see that before I ever agree to anything.
Suggestions?
You asked me an easy one. I'm happy we take away, if members decide, of course, take away the request to talk to developers and see if there's any further detail, or how much further detail we can get as to what they can do with this open space. In terms of contributions, I'll just be completely honest, because there's no point being anything other, in saying that if it wasn't for the government allowing this vacant building credit, there was already a process underway where they were asking us to waive the affordable housing anyway through viability. Their view is because of the amount of demolition, contamination, land raising, and everything else on their site, there is not a vast amount of money that's going to come out the end of it. So the only big caveat, the honest caveat I put on it is, if we're not careful, there's a risk they will just turn around and say, so it's just not viable again, we'll just leave it as it is, as a couple of big sheds. That's the only danger with this, Chairman, but I've got no trouble at all. The members want us to go away and see if we can get some more detail on what they can do to address the erosion issue. In terms of the flood risk issue, I don't think that there's any chance of that being addressed with this application, to be really honest. The money's just not in there.
Can I just clarify, through you, Chairman, on page 33, the flood risk, the suggestion is made about, that's a new one to me, FFL. Didn't know what FFL was, but something else I've learned today. If are the FFLs going to be as per the reports, the raising of them?
They are, Chairman, and I think that's just, at that point, if members do decide to defer this, it would be helpful if members could confirm they're happy with the approach they use for land raising on the site or not, subject to that issue being addressed.
But you're saying, sorry Lee, you're saying that it does meet the...
Yeah, what they've done is they've put the finished floor level above,
Right.
what they've gone for, 4.3 above
Right, now,
Woodland State and level, or 4.6.
in effect, we're talking about two things, aren't we? We're talking about erosion and change in sea levels.
Yes.
So there are two things happening there. Now, as far as they give them a life of 100 years, it's going to be fiendishly difficult to get insurance for these houses, I reckon, because they are at high risk. So, are they saying that if the raising takes place as there, then they have a life of 100 years? Or they have a longer life?
Well, I think in reality they'll probably have a longer life. I think what they've said is the lifetime of development is reasonable at 100 years.
Right.
But what they're saying is within that period, they believe that the floor levels are built at this level. When the worst case flood event occurs, it will not go into the ground floor of people's properties. That's what they're trying to design out. And they're also making the estate roads high enough so that if it happened in the middle of the night, for example, when the power cuts, all the lights go out, people can come out of their house and they can walk along the estate road without being at real risk. That's the plan.
When you're out.
Yeah. Obviously, the risk is reducing as you go towards Windmill because the land levels are rising by that point. But that's the thinking behind it. If you're trapped in your house in the dark, water should not be coming in through flooding.
Richard, sorry, Mr. Chairman, but
If I can help, when I built my house, what you see here written about 4.3s and 4.6 above Woodland State and Newham, I had to lower the house by a foot in old money because I had to raise it a foot above the current land level at my place to be above the 1 in 100 year risk. And the insurance company took that into consideration, that I'm safe for 100 years, so they insured the place. So this is exactly the same. If they built it on the current level, which they wouldn't be allowed to do because the Environment Agency would project.
Yeah, for water defence
So-
houses.
With all the various bodies that are to do with flood risk and all the rest of it, and insurance companies, this is the measurement that puts it above any concern for insurance purposes, etc. So while all the people surrounding the site will all be underwater, these people won't be. That's a normal life.
Chairman, that was the point I wanted to make, is that when Barrett's, I think, were looking at, they were talking about putting a table in the bow mouth of Windmill Grove and Windmill Lane, so as to take away the flood water coming around that way. So it's very, Lee is saying, well, the people will be able to walk out of their houses, down the roads and keep dry, but directly they go down that slope, they'll be into flood water because the water will have come up through Wickenhill Lane and round in the front of them, so they'll be surrounded on an island.
By the time that happens, Roger, we'll have a barrier in Portsmouth Harbour to stop it, or we'll have sea defences, because that's probably 50 years away for that sort of problem. This is the problem. Anyway, right, so what are we going to do? Put it off, or do we not want to take the risk of losing the...
Well, if you don't mind me saying, Chairman, I think it would be helpful for members' views on the idea of raising land in the floor levels. Because if officers were able, for example, to indicate that that principle was okay to you as a planning committee, but we want to understand the details how you're going to deal with the erosion.
Yeah,
I can see with some way we would take it forward. If you, as members, have got, you're just not happy with the site raising or the floor levels.
I'll speak from my own personal point of view, and what I think I'm gathering is we're happy with that, we're just not happy with the way the open space and what may happen to it in the future when it starts to roll back beyond the fence line inwards. So I mean, I would think that we're saying the scheme's fairly satisfactory. We don't have a problem with the design, the roads, etc., and how it's all set out, but we do have a problem with how that open space handed over to some company in the future to maintain, once they find they've got thousands and thousands to spend on it because the land has come back through the fence. That's what we want sorted. Would that be a fair assessment?
I think, Chairman, I would certainly like to see, as I said earlier on, what are the wording in the 106 agreement and how they're going to deal with it. I'm not prepared to just accept that they're going to hand it over and that will be it. I want to see a little bit more detail and meat on that bone, because it's important. That is the important issue here. There isn't, I don't believe, another issue. It's that issue about flooding. We need to totally know exactly what they're going to do and how they're going to deal with it. Now, as you said a moment ago, management companies come and go. And if they hand it over to a management company, that management company disappears. Where are we left? Where are the house owners left? I mean, for instance, is it going to be written into the deeds of the properties that on that bottom end, because they're facing the shoreline? Are they going to be responsible? There's a whole raft of issues around that responsibility, etc., which need to be ironed out so that we know exactly what we're actually agreeing to.
Thank you, Peter Chair. A couple of issues, I suppose, in terms of how it might bind successors in titles and individual owner occupiers. Different authorities take differing stances on that. I mean, for example, if you have an obligation to pay the council £1 million, it's normally expected that the developer freeholder would pay that, and the LPA wouldn't go after each individual owner-occupiers later on down the line should that developer not have paid, and you'd sue them through the courts for breach of contract. But it's not to say that an LPA would be entitled to draft the agreement to the extent that you could sue each individual occupiers on a jointly and severally basis. So you could sue one individual occupier for the whole whack, for example. And so that would apply in respect to this management plan, that you might say, well, the management plan secures the long-term protection from erosion of the entire open space. And so the council, through its powers of 106, could take direct steps to enforce that and put the cost back onto owner of 2A, for example, or all of them together. So they're sort of the nuts and bolts that you could do, how you could construct the 106 agreement. I mean, generally speaking, you would probably want to ensure that liability does go to that extent, and that would force, through the conveyancing, the sellers to ensure that there was this commuted sum or some form of money held somewhere to protect that eventuality, because buyer beware, so no purchaser or a conveyancer would advise his client to say, you know, you could be liable for a substantial sum later down the line. So they're the things we could do in a 106. In terms of the management plan, the detail would come through in the management plan. So the 106, all we would seek to do is set out the broad parameters or the bottom lines. So we might say, don't commence development until you've submitted a management plan, which, for the avoidance of doubt, must include the long-term protection and prevention of erosion of this open space. But I don't think that is what necessarily planning officers envisage here. They expect that sort of balance between erosion and maintenance as it eats into that open space, and how the open space will then be reconfigured and addressed over the long term, over the lifetime of this development. But we can set that if the members are minded to.
I'm struggling, Alex. I'm trying to think of a management company that would even be prepared to take this on with that hidden possible cost, because it almost implies that if at some stage Eastern Coastal Partnership and their partners don't build a sea defence, then at some stage when that land erodes back beyond that fence, the management company, because I'm presuming the owners will have the boundaries of their land where their back garden ends, that will be their properties, and they'll have no responsibility for the open space beyond it. So therefore, until it gets into their properties, it's not their problem. But I'm trying to think, any management company would take this on knowing that immediately it gets past that, they're going to have to build a sea defence of some description or something to stop that land from eroding away.
Mr. Chairman, can I just add, I mean, the Solicitor Council has actually sort of said is that what could be put into a 106 agreement, but the point being is that the developer may not agree to that, and I think that's why it's so important that we know what is going to be included rather than just supposition of what we can do without knowing what the other side of the equation is going to agree to or not. So I strongly believe we should actually defer this for further consultation with the developer.
Okay. For that issue, just that issue. The rest of it we're happy with, just on that issue. Councillor Ford, let's get on.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to go slightly off my tangent here. The houses, I think that Councillor Price referred to, plots 10 to 19, the southerly facing ones, I see do not meet our design guidance. They've only got 8 metre back gardens. The reasons given that it's acceptable are indeed the public open space behind them, the views. Is that reasonable? I'm sure it is, because you say it is, but just raise that as a query.
It's reasonable.
It's against the public open space that's going to disappear, we
We were calling the garden in a couple of years' time. Right.
and the second one is parking provision. Some of them don't meet the parking SPD but have convenient parking bays located nearby. Are those parking bays dedicated to those houses marked thus?
Chairman, through you, sorry. 2 questions there. I'll take the second one first. The parking provision complies with the SPD in terms of the number of parking spaces. In the vast majority of cases, well, let me put it like this. Each unit has at least 1 car parking space immediately outside of, well, most of them have parking spaces, allocated parking spaces immediately outside of them. And specifically in the northern part of the site, there's all on-plot parking around here. The difficulty comes when we're talking about these properties where my cursor are now, where in order to present an acceptable street scene and physically to fit in parking spaces, those parking spaces are now are over here instead. So they're not as convenient as in an ideal world we would like, but they're not far away. And in terms of these properties along the south here, they all have at least 1 space, if not both of the 2 allocated spaces immediately outside. Those that don't have 1 space and an additional space over here. That was basically the best arrangement in terms of car parking that we could come up with. But in terms of parking provision, absolutely it meets the parking standards SPD.
may I just ask, sorry, Chairman, the 6 that you mentioned first, are those 6 for six individual properties? I see the tandem, or are they 2 for 3 properties?
They're 2 for 3 properties, so the tandem spaces belong to the same property.
Thank you.
So there shouldn't be any conflicts in that respect. The first question you asked me was about the garden space. I think it's acknowledged in the report. The garden space is for some of the properties, not all, but mostly, in particular, these plots here, 10 to 19, I think it was. Their garden sizes fall short of the 11-metre expectation. There's a number of things that are factored into the recommendation. The desire to see the site redeveloped, but also the proximity of these dwellings to the public open space, and the fact that at the end of these gardens there's not another garden and a dwelling, there is an area of open space. So in terms of physical and visual space about the building, there is plenty, and on balance we felt that in the circumstances that was acceptable here. Can I just pick up on a point about because I sense that there might be a deferral to explore this issue about coastal erosion. It would be useful just to get a steer from members, if you don't mind me saying so, about what it is that you would like me you would like us to discuss with the applicants in particular. Let me explain what the 106 at present is designed to secure. I need to be clear that it's not designed to provide any protection against erosion. That's not the idea. It's to manage the erosion process. So it's not intended that through the 106 the developer would put in some defences to prevent erosion from happening in the future. It would be that erosion, natural erosion of the shore, is managed over a period of time.
How do you manage erosion? It's erosion, isn't it? Just eats the ground.
It does, but left unchecked, of course, the fence and the footpath would disappear.
Well, that's the same thing. They've got to repair what's lost.
So the public open space management plan requires details of how those would be set further back into the site.
No, that's not what we're looking for.
That was basically my question. That's what is envisaged at the moment, but I think members are looking at something.
There's a fixed line, which is that fence line which they claim is the land ownership. What I'm interested in, I think the other councillors is that land, at least that line is managed and kept where it is. Not a managed process of, oh, it's back to their back
Not a
gates
managed
now.
erosion, no. I want to go back and back.
And we've got to bear in mind that the more it eats into that land, I'm well informed, is full of junk and rubbish. It's just got a bit of topsoil on top, which makes it look good. But underneath that, so once the tide starts eating into that area, it'll move pretty fast, and you'll have a scrapyard in the back of it.
You can actually see, as I know you're aware, Mr. Chairman, the actual stuff coming out of the shoreline on occasions now from within there.
But the bit we've got to get to the bottom of, Chairman, sorry, and I think we'll probably need to curtail this, is at the moment, and I know there's doubts on this, the applicant is saying, we do not own this.
No.
So they're not entitled to do anything at all, if that's correct. In terms of any of this land, they can't go in and do any works. They don't control, that's what they're telling us, they don't control it, they've got no legal rights to do anything to it. Which is something we're going to have to factor, we're happy to take the discussion away, because I understand what members are asking us, but we are going to have to factor in the first 10, 15 feet, they do not own.
If I'm not wrong, at the moment, the land that's outside of it, we repair. Because I know for a fact they've got stuck a sleeper in there, our people have done that. So they've tried to maintain a footpath outside the fence. What I'm talking about is what happens when the erosion goes beyond that and eats away the existing land they do own.
Yes.
I mean, if I was a developer, I also would say, well, I don't own that land, I really can't do anything about that. But yes, your point you're making is absolutely valid. As you get erosion, what will be done to at some point not manage it in terms of moving back 2 feet a year or 2 feet every 5 years until the kitchen falls into the sea. What will be done?
I'm assuming that we, as we do at the moment, repair the existing footpath, not very well. I mean, they just chuck a few bits of wood down and some scalpels. That's it. what happens when it goes beyond that? And there again, there's another question. If we let it go and it goes into there, is that our responsibility as well?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if you take the situation along Hill Head and from Southern Breezes, where there's been enormous coastal erosion there, the only reason we still have a footpath is because the landowner has willingly given up some of their land to allow the footpath to be moved back. But if the landowner said no, then there will be no footpath. Quite simple.
Mr. Chairman, as I think you know, is that this particular area through here, from the castle right the way around past your property, right the way along the shoreline, right through to Wicker, is a maintain and hold that particular line. That's our policy as a council, to hold that line. So that is important as well. It's not in, I think, Southern Breezes and some parts of that area there, is not to hold the line, not to hold the line, but to let it erode. But that is not the position of this piece here. So it's important that we do maintain that line. And whether, how I've always looked at it, is that people backing onto or owning land on there, if there's a contribution from, particularly when you've got a major development, a contribution helps us, as Councillor Evans said, the £1 for 7, I think it is.
If you're trying to get government grants, that's the sort of business case.
Yeah. So a contribution from them helps us, and then with other situations which may arise, then helps us to actually get that money from the Environment Agency, then to actually do the seawall right the way along, and that's the right way ahead. So to me,
It sounds like we're looking for a contribution, in the simplest terms.
yes,
However we can get it.
yes.
Wouldn't it be simpler, Chairman, to turn it down on grounds of whatever category?
No, I don't think we want to do that.
And then, or they can then, when they
No, we don't want to
tell
move away from it. Trust
Okay, I
Bryce
trust.
and I on this one, we know exactly what it's all about.
The worst scenario is to turn it down, for them to go to appeal, we've got no control over it whatsoever. We want to control it here.
Good thought.
A deferral to sort out what they're going to do, and we defer a contribution if it's possible.
Put a proposal in.
Because, I mean, there's quite a sill amount from this, but of course, we can't have the sill, can we? Or any part of it, we can.
We think on the face of it, for the infrastructure,
Ah,
cedar fences, the sills could be used for it.
probably been spent already. What's our, Keith, what's our policy on, I thought all sill payments nothing could be taken out of sill payments. I thought it all had to go to like Western Waters Pool and there's all a whole series of things that are taken up all the time.
We take sill payments in, we have a section of whatever it is list which indicates areas where something might be spent, but none of it is actually specifically earmarked for any one particular project, as I understand it, looking at Lee.
Could we? That's what I'm asking.
I don't think you do, no.
I don't think the decisions on how seal is spent is made in this room, is the issue. I mean, it's through the section 106, it's going to be directly related to what you're going to put here.
Is there any way, given the nature of this particular application, what the implications of sea erosion? Could we not take a sum out of the seal pot and put it into a pot which could build up over a
I
period of
do
time?
not think we would probably wish to do that. I would have thought if the developer was able to get a contribution, that contribution should be under a 106 agreement, and that should be put into a reserve pot ideally to deal with coastal erosion matters in this area. And I think it does have to be reasonably adjacent, doesn't it, Lee?
Yes,
106,
yeah.
So you could put it into a pot and say, it's to go for future defence as a 106 contribution.
I don't know anything about this sort of thing. Well, could we swivel the seal money into a 106 contribution? What do you mean you wouldn't want to?
Well, because we have behind the sill, there's is it section 78, section 87, there's a list, isn't there, which is renewed and looked each year, which identifies areas of potential spend for sill. And it's important we have that because we can't then double up and claim 106 money as well. And certainly
No, I wasn't
social
suggesting
defence
that
is not part of it. Well, if it's not part of that list, then you can't then push the seal money into to be used on. If we can get contribution, I would have thought 106 is your best agreement because you get the contribution and you can designate what it's for.
Does that make any sense? Can we do anything on those lines?
Really strong advice, you Chairman, is to defer the item.
Right, okay, I'll defer it then and...
Because I think you've got an awful lot of questions that we need to probably research and
Okay.
come back to your members to say these are your options.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we agree defer it? Agree. Agree?